This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, non-stop Leafs talk starts now.
What's going on? Flying solo like Jason Derulo once again today, but it's all good as we inch closer to another Maple Leafs game day presented by PointsBet Canada and Montana's. It's the Wednesday edition of Leafs Morning Take, a.k.a. all-you-can-eat ribs day at Montana's. Yours truly, Nick Alberga, with you at the Golden Muzzy, where you can find me on social media. Another day as a firefighter for Jay Rosehill. That said, he will make an appearance in about 5 minutes or so for another installment of 3 Hits with Rosie. Who knows what Rosie's going to spout off on, I should say, this time. He's just an absolute wild card, as we know. I took a quick peek at the video. It's 3:33. I actually like to unwrap them on air with you guys, so I actually don't watch till they're on air because I want a quick reaction and I want a legitimate reaction to them. So I could only wonder what Rosie's got in store for 3 Hits with Rosie. That's coming up in about 5 minutes from now. As per usual, lots coming up on the show today. As mentioned, I've got another fantastic guest lined up for you. In about 10 minutes from now, from Overdrive and Leafs Lunch on TSN 1050, Al's brother, a.k.a. Mike Distefano, is set to make his highly anticipated debut here on Leafs Morning Take. Additionally, make sure to check out the Locked on Leafs podcast, Two Italians Talking Puck. Can't beat that. It's actually Mike and David Morisuti, who I worked with over at Sportsnet, two Italian studs and stallions. So make sure to check out their podcast. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Producer Alex putting it on the board right there. We are migrating over to our very own YouTube page. You got the Bruce Boudreau interview up there. We got some fantastic shorts as well. At the Leafs Nation 401, at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe, like, and check out our content, here on YouTube. And over the next couple of weeks, I would say, we're going to start going live on our very spanking new YouTube page there at the Leafs Nation 401. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, as per usual. If you have something to say, drop us a line down in the chat below here on YouTube, and I'll get to those later on in the show. But for now, let's get over the boards. All right, so first and foremost, as mentioned, Montana's is bringing back the viewing party with daily deals in 2023. It's Wednesday, an exciting day. It's hump day, but all-you-can-eat ribs. Look at those juicy, juicy ribs on your screen. And I think on top of that, it's important to bring up on Friday, we're giving away a $50 gift card courtesy of our new friends over at Montana's. Here's how to enter for your chance to win. Like the post you see on the screen. Follow Montana's BBQ and TLNDC on social media and tag your friends in the comments. Each comment is an entry. And of course, we'll be announcing a winner coming up on Friday, February 10th. And of course, Rosie will be in the saddle for that. But $50 at Montana's goes a long way with all the value deals they got cooking here, especially to start off 2023. So first and foremost, I should say, easy for me to say, yesterday's show, we did have a listener queue teed up, but of course we had Gabby Boudreau on, so we wanted to give him the time to go a bit longer because he's got a lot to say and we loved having him on. So I thought I would address it today. So I put out a post on social media yesterday or a couple days back about listener questions, and this one tickled my fancy. Can Bunting, Kerfoot, and Yarncroke pull the weight needed in the Leafs' top 6? Personally, I think the best route for the Leafs is to address the trade market and look at a bona fide stud in that top 6. I think in any world, you'd love a Timo Meier, you'd love a Patrick Kane, you'd love a Ryan O'Reilly. Sadly, there's every other team vying for the same type of guys. So that's the unique part of it to me. I think these guys are pretty good depth pieces, as you see on your board right there. Obviously, I think Michael Bunting's going to stick wherever Matthews and Marner and such go. I think Kerfoot, I just don't know if he has the staying power long-term here, at least to wrap up, I would say, his Maple Leafs career. I don't know if he's going to be here long-term, to be fair. I think he's better served for a bottom 6 role, ideally, or as a trade guy that goes out to free up money to bring a guy in. And Calle Jarnkrok's had a really, really impressive season, especially lately, I would say, since Christmas, playing with the likes of John Tavares, playing with Marner, playing with Nylander at times as well, and having a lot of success, a lot of chemistry. But this is why they got this guy, and that's why they got that value deal. Like, that's a really, really sexy contract, if you ask me, when it comes to Calle Jarnkrok. But again, he's another guy who I think is better served for a bottom 6 role. And that's why I think if you're to pull me on those 3 guys, Bunting staying in the top 6. I think Kerfoot's a fringe guy. I think Jarnkrok is better suited to be a 3rd or 4th. Not even a 4th liner. Like, he's played above expectation, so probably a 3rd liner. If they can't get somebody, I think they should feel okay with having Yarncroke in that top 6. But I think in a perfect world, as mentioned, you were trying to address that top 6, trying to add somebody. It's been really, really quiet on the trade front. I know the Leafs are in their bye week, but I think Kyle Dubas has been asked quite a bit what his intentions are. He's not going to give away much, but you would think they're looking for a defenseman. They're looking for, say, a middle 6 forward. Easier said than done, especially in this economy and in this climate. I mean, it seems to be more buyers than sellers. And you look at the assets, you look at the cap world, there's a lot of intangibles and variables that go into the situation. But to answer your question, I do appreciate that Gold member. What a name here on Twitter. I do think those guys can pull their weight. Having said that, I'm not sure they're guys who are going to put you over the top in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And that's been the big story to me. We've talked about that a lot on the show this year, where they get to the postseason. It's been more so about the well-running drive for the big boys than it has, about the goaltending situation or the team defense. So any way you can get it, I think there's no such thing as depth scoring and more scoring and enough scoring, right? I think that time of year specifically, you have your heroes, you have your studs who you pay your big money to, but the depth scoring is what ultimately puts a team over the top. Just like Colorado last year, guy they brought in at the deadline, Arturi Lehkonen from the Montreal Canadiens, ended up being a big piece for that team. Val Nichushkin, who they brought in a couple years ago as well. So you need those complementary pieces. I always like to bring up Tampa and Brandon Hagel and Nick Paul. I'm very fascinated. I really, really am, as we inch closer and closer to the March 3rd trade deadline. So again, Al's Brothers coming up in about 3 minutes. But for now, here's another installment of 3 Hits with Rosie.
Hey guys, welcome back to 3 Hits with Rosie. Number one, I'm just starting off with Bruce Boudreau joining us again today. Just touch on that again. Pretty awesome of him to stop by. A former Toronto boy, former Maple Leaf, and lifelong fan of the Maple Leafs. To be honest with you, he's not really supposed to be doing any media. You got to understand that he's still under contract with the Vancouver Canucks. And as much as me and Nick would have loved to grill him yesterday about what happened there, what the scenario was, what the fallout was, the whole kit and caboodle would be great to get into. But at the end of the day, obviously the Canucks aren't gonna have that, and they're doing a little bit of damage control on some PR stuff, and rightfully so. It's all good. We had to respect that fact and just shoot the shit with Bruce about some Maple Leaf stuff, and he was pretty awesome to give us his time and tell us some some insight about playing for the Leafs back in the mid to late 70s, which I thought was pretty cool. Also, I just think I want to touch back on the fact that he's been in major hockey in one faction or another for 50 years. 50. Think about that. If a guy has a 20-year career in something, everyone's fawning over it and saying what an accomplishment that is, and how incredible it is to have that kind of longevity. And he did that with his playing career, and then just went off on a whole new coaching career. And he was just a head coach in the NHL a couple of weeks ago. It's insane. 50 years. It's hard to wrap your head around that. And when you think of the ups and downs in that business and how hard it is to keep a job and land a job and tote your family around and stuff, it's big time respect I give to Mr. Boudreau for hanging in there that long and making his impact on this game. He must really love it, and after talking to him, you can tell that he really does. Number two here, we're just talking about the trade deadline's coming up here soon. We've been talking about for a while, but now it's really in our crosshairs here. The fact that All-Star Weekend is over, and that's the next thing on the calendar, and it's really creeping up. And after talking to Bruce, I really think I agree with the fact, excuse me, that we want maybe another defenseman, maybe something to complement Gio, that Luke Shen type we talked about. Tell me what you guys think. Is that something where we need to go? I know years ago it was offense that we were lacking in the playoffs. Well, I don't think you could put more offense on paper than this core group of forwards has for them. That top four is just on fire, and if we can't get it done with that offense, then I don't know what to tell you, but you can only load up one side of your team so much, and I think they've done that. And now we need to maybe address what we need in those playoffs, those grindy playoff series. Maybe a nice defenseman would be solid depending on what you have to give up for him. And then there's another conversation also about that core secondary scoring on the bottom six forwards too. Let us know what you guys think. Number three, just bringing it home. I mean, I can't wait to get this thing going again. This bye week is tough when you're wanting to play hockey, when you're wanting to see what the team has, when you're chomping at the bit to see who's healthy and who's not. But can't wait till the boys get back on the ice, see where us Austin Matthews is, see where Matt Murray is, see what kind of health we have, and see if we're ready to rock and roll. Because now that February is starting to tick by, there's nothing left to chomp the bit at. You get this trade deadline down, and then all of a sudden it's home free to the playoffs. So excited to get the boys going again here. Let's get this week over with, and any comments or concerns you got, hit us up on it, and we'll try to respond as best as we can. Thanks, guys.
Holy shit, the guy is an absolute natural. I was talking to Rosie in person a couple weeks ago, and we were in the alumni box, and I was like, man, it's pretty amazing where you came from your first show to where you're at now, where he pretty much has verbal diarrhea and just spouting out nonsense. But that was another fantastic 3 hits with Rosie. For now, as mentioned, as advertised off the top, so happy to bring in today's guests from TSN 1050, Overdrive's Leafs Lunch, as well as the Locked On Leafs podcast. It is Mike Distefano, a.k.a. Al's brother. How's it going, buddy?
What's going on, Nick? How you doing? I feel like I've never actually
I'm
called you
okay.
Nick before. You're just probably like Bergs or Alberga. I don't know. It felt weird.
Well, it's the same thing with you, right? Like when you do hits, like do you go by Mike? Do you go by Al's brother? Somewhere in between? Is there a nickname we don't know about?
No, there's no Nick in the name. But honestly, whatever the host typically goes with is what I'll go with. Like it is whatever people want to go with, I suppose. Mike works. Al's brother also works. I'm well aware of the gravity that nickname, I guess, has given me and the weight that it has, and especially the sports and hockey world. So Al's brother works. Mike works. Whatever you want to go with.
I could only wonder and think about your Italian relatives being Al's brother. What is this? Like, do they ask you that? Like, do you...
Always, man. Always. All my aunts and uncles always being like,
with
what's
the
the Al's
hands?
brother all about? Like, who's Al? Like, your brother's name's Christian. Do they know that? Yes, they know. It has nothing to do with it. Like, I still get texts like from people from high school who may not be big sports fans, but they'll be at the bar at like a Boston Pizza or something, and they'll snap a pic if I'm on Overdrive and be like, "Oh my God, is this you? Like, why does it say Al's brother?" And then I have to explain, oh, it's a character name essentially. It's a nickname, but yes, that is I. And yeah, so I still get those messages to this day.
I haven't been shy on social media, as you know. Big fan of the station, big fan of your work, big fan of O-Dog, and we had Hayes on last week. I think Noodles is coming up in the next couple weeks. But I love that
Nice.
element of the show. It's like a campfire conversation. You never know what's going to come out of anybody's mouth, and I like that they have like nicknames for everybody, man. It's like hilarious. I don't know anybody's name behind the scenes, but I think it actually adds to the persona, doesn't it?
No, it totally does, and it just it goes to show how much fun we have on the show, right? Like, if you're not taking your name seriously, like, I mean, doesn't that just show it basically? Like, no one's that serious, and we just have a lot of fun on the show. And I mean, I guess we could probably blame Odog for that. He's the guy who likes to hand out all the nicknames. There's a guy who used to work here. He used to say, you have your given name by your parents, and then you have the name that you're given by Odog, and those are the two names that typically will stick with you, especially professionally. And obviously, that's been the case with me and Hazy B, and the Grappler. Like, all of those can be attributed to the O-Dog himself.
Yeah, and I don't know O very well, but he strikes me as a guy, if he's giving you a nickname, it means he really respects you and really, really likes you. So I think that's a positive thing. You guys continue to bang out fantastic stuff. I will ask you about your Super Bowl pick, but let's jump into the Leafs conversation. I know you're tight for time here with Leafs Lunch coming up in about 45 or so. So at the bye week here, the All-Star break, your just general feelings on this team as we move closer and closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah, like I feel pretty good about this team from the perspective. I mean, they're what, fourth, fifth in the league in terms of points percentage. Actually, I think they probably jumped up to fourth with Tampa coming out of the break, hitting a little speed bump. And like, how can you not be happy with that? Especially when you look at the fact that Austin Matthews still hasn't looked like the Austin Matthews that we expect from him. I think when he comes back from his injury, he should be rested and ready to go and go on a tear down the stretch. Morgan Riley hasn't really been particularly good in the first half. I think getting that goal right ahead of the break, maybe that gives him confidence going into the second half. You had the injury to TJ Brody, which, they powered through. So I think this team actually is probably positioned to have a better second half than a first half. And that's saying something considering that, again, they're a top 5 team in the NHL. And that's not just when you look at the underlying numbers, but also, or not just to say in the standings, but also you look at the underlying numbers, and they deservedly are a top 5 team. So I feel pretty good about them. Health is obviously going to be the main one there. And, now you got this Matt Murray ankle injury, which who knows where that's going to lead to, I guess, is what I'll say about that. But, Samsonov has come in and pretty well steadied the ship, and he's gained trust, I would say, of Leafs Nation. So they're not, it could have been a lot worse of a first half, let's say. So I think that the fact that they made it through as a top 5 team, second half might even be better.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Matt Murray. I took some heat, I think it was last week, and I always take heat on social media, but I sort of said it was like an act, this whole Matt Murray thing, knowing what I know about, the player and the body of work the last couple of years specifically. Maybe
Yeah.
I should have phrased it a bit differently, but I think from the Leafs perspective, you have to be a tad concerned. Are you concerned with the goaltending situation? Obviously, Samsonov's had a fantastic season, but I just think the guy behind him right now is just so unreliable. Do you really want to get to game one with that tandem?
Yeah, that's the big question that I think the Leafs are probably going to have to figure out the next few weeks. How much can you trust that Matt Murray will be healthy and ready to go if his name is called in the playoffs at some point? And like, I'm not one that believes that we'll see a tandem come playoff time. I think that they'll
Yeah.
battle it out, and whoever is anointed as the number one for game one, I mean, that'll be his net to lose at that point. And at this point, I guess it's got to be Ilya Samsonov, but you never know what could happen, right? Like whether it's an injury or performance issues. Like there's a reason why both of these guys were let go by their teams last year. Like just flat out, their teams did not want them. So I think that there's always going to be question marks there. So is there concern? Yeah, I would say there is. Like I don't have the most trust in the goaltending situation, but I will say that Samsonov, I think at least is starting to earn trust of a lot of Leaf fans. I'm sure even you could say that you're in a much better spot headspace when he's in net compared to
hmm
Matt Murray, and definitely more so today than he was maybe of day one of training camp.
Your level of concern, how many shots at Grappa would that be?
Ooh, man. For maybe not too many. Like probably go solid like, yeah, maybe 4 shots of grappa, 4 shots
Yeah,
down
yeah.
the gullet. Maybe that's not too
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
I've
Yeah, I
had
could see
many
that.
many weddings where there was far more that have been taken than that. So,
Absolutely seasoned vet, the limoncello flowing as well, sure, at weddings. So
oh
I check out the podcast routinely as well. I guested with you guys, the Italian Stallions themselves. But you recently talked, I think it was yesterday's show, about what the Leafs should prioritize at the trade deadline. What say you? We're closing in on March 3rd, obviously, and the next couple weeks should be very, very fascinating from the Maple Leafs perspective.
yeah, I've honestly I'm the biggest flip flopper on this one. Like it seems like week by week I'm changing my mind here. I'm starting to lean back towards a defenseman, and I heard Jay talking about this also on your show or just moments ago in the three
Yeah,
hits. Like I'm starting to also get back to thinking they might need just the different elements and go and get themselves, whether it's a top four physical guy. I know Jake McCabe is a name that's been tossed out there. Gavrikov, obviously. I kind of like the idea of maybe a Connor Murphy also out of Chicago as a potential. He's got some term left. I think that he's a guy that could play some top 4 minutes. Or maybe even you go and you just try and get a depth guy like a Luke Shen potentially. So there's a couple
yeah.
of I guess, avenues that the Leafs could go to upgrade their D. But I think there's a couple upgrades that you can make at forward too. And I don't necessarily think the Maple Leafs need to make a big splash and go and get a Timo Meyer or a Patrick Kane. I think I'd prefer more depth options, B-level options, whether that's an Ivan Barbashev. Nick Bonino is a name that I've brought up a couple of times. I think he could come in
hmm
and be a pretty solid bottom six player. He has that winning pedigree with the Penguins a couple of years ago, and he could help this penalty kill, which to me is like a low key concern. Like right now, the penalty
Hmm.
kill I think is hovering under 80%, like pretty much right in the midway mark. I think they're 16th ranked in the league, and last year they were the third best penalty kill, and they've lost a couple of players that were part of that PK. So I think if they could get some dudes who can go in and help there, like if Nick Bonino, some other fourth line players, third liners, I think that could help with this team as well. Nick Bukestad is another name that I've brought up as a potential option too.
I think Florida is a prime example of maybe it's not so smart to blow your brains out. Even Columbus a couple years ago, it just really doesn't get you anywhere. And then conversely, you look at some of these teams, earlier on, I brought up Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel. And, you
Yeah.
talk about teams the last couple years who have, Arturi Lehkonen last year, like you bring in these complementary pieces like these Swiss Army knives, more Cali Yarncroaks, if you ask me, I think make more sense than going for the jugular, going all in a Patrick Kane if he wants to come here, a Tarasenko and O'Reilly, guys who are really, really good at cost. Like I think that makes more sense in the grand scheme of things. Do you?
I completely agree. And I was chatting with oh wow, I'm gonna blank on the play by play gentleman in Boston. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but we had him on Leafs
Yeah.
lunch, and then we were talking off air afterwards, and we asked him, did you expect this out of Boston? Like, why are they so good this season? And his answer was, well, because they beefed up the peripherals, right? Like they had the Marchands, the Bergerons, Pasternak, and you can go down defensively, and Lindholm was already there, McAvoy was there, Taylor Hall. So they already had the stars. You look at the Maple Leafs, same way, right? Like they've got their core four, their big four. You can add Riley in there as a fifth, maybe even TJ
Yeah.
Brody. But what the Boston Bruins did and why this year they've had so much more success is they've added those secondary and tertiary pieces, right? I mean, David Krejci helped, obviously, coming back into the fold, but that just pushed guys down a little bit. Now you've got a guy like Coyle, who's instead of being a second line center, is now the team's third line center. Instead of having Nick Foligno in your top six, now he's in your bottom six. And just getting everybody incrementally better by pushing guys down the lineup. So if the Leafs could do that, just get their bottom six guys just a little bit better than what they've got cooking right now, I think that could go a long way. And we know that there's a collision at some point with either the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston
Hmm.
Bruins. And the name of their game is depth. And I think right now the Leafs maybe lack a little bit of depth when it comes to those secondary and tertiary guys, and that's where I think maybe the Maple Leafs could focus on come the deadline.
It's funny. Everybody likes to talk about the postseason and what does this team in ultimately. It's never really been the goaltending or the defense. It's been the big boys drying up when it matters most. Like I vividly remember that
Yeah.
Columbus series. I remember the Montreal series, the Tampa series, and that's my
Well, what Marner
fascination. I
went
don't
like Marner
exactly.
went like 18 straight games without a goal. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's what we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think you can never have enough depth. So certainly I'm along the same notes as you. You do a bang up job, dude. Before I let you go, I'm not a big football guy, but you always got some tremendous information, as you guys say on the show. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
Uh, all right. Well, so I've been going back and forth a little bit here. I've been going back and forth, but ultimately, hopefully Luke and Hayes aren't listening right now, so they don't jack my material here. But I think I'm leaning with the Eagles, man. I just, I think that team, there's not a lot of holes there. They're a really deep club, and I still am a little bit concerned with the injuries going on the Chiefs side of things, particularly their offense. I mean, a high ankle sprain, that's like a 4 to 6 week injury, and 3 weeks later he's playing against the top defense in Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. That's going to be tough. There's not. I think McCole Hardman's already out, and Juju and Kadarius Toney are considered they're going to play, but they're pretty banged up themselves. So who's going to throw the ball to? Kelsey had back issue last week and was, a game time decision. Like they're all going to play, but how effective can they be? They're clearly not 100%. So I think that the Eagles are going to take this one.
It's funny you say that because I was in Florida at All-Star Weekend talking to a couple buddies who are big football fans, and I'm like, I suffered a high ankle sprain playing beer league hockey, and I literally couldn't walk properly for like 6 months. Now, granted, this is the NFL; they have the best doctors on earth. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but for Mahomes to come back after like a week in practice, dude, I was in bed for at least a month with crutches and the whole shebang.
That's because you're
So.
soft, Nick. It's because
Yeah,
you're
pretty
soft.
much, Mike. Pretty much. You are not, man. I appreciate your time. I know you got a show in about 35 or so, so appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, bud.
Yeah, man. Anytime, pal.
Take care. That's the one and only Al's brother, a.k.a. Mike Distefano, the Italian stallion. They do fantastic work over at TSN. And again, Locked On Leafs podcast. Make sure to check that out as well. I know we're a rivaling podcast, but I think the more the merrier, and it's great for the brand and everybody involved. And there's a lot of great people, knowing what I know in the last 12 years of working in the broadcast industry. So I got no beef with anybody, at least here in this market. No, I'm kidding. I got no beef with anybody, but I appreciate Mike for hopping on. I just love his work, man. He brings the passion, the energy, and I'd probably fade his Super Bowl pick, to be quite frank about it. But I'm going to get Rosie's pick. You guys have watched enough to know that I'm not really a football guy. I always default to Rosie in that regard. So I'll get his Super Bowl pick. I'll put him under the gun on Friday. Maybe he'll do the PointsBet Canada bet of the day. Speaking of which, the wrap up is brought to you by our friends at PointsBet Canada. I could just hear Rosie in my ear right now because I was feeling great, feeling good about Tampa yesterday and the puck line, the old revenge, the response game after they were just hammered by the Florida Panthers on Monday. I was feeling good. They were up, I think, 3-1 in that game against San Jose. Stamkos got a goal called back, and next thing you know, the Sharks muscle back. Then they score an OT, a 3-point night for Erik Karlsson, and just like that, there goes my puck line. So I'm going to try to start a new streak today. For that one, I'm going to go to Broadway. The New York Rangers, the Vancouver Canucks. You all know by now I love the revenge narrative. JT Miller, former New York Ranger, now with the Vancouver Canucks, signs that fresh contract a couple months ago. I like Miller over 2.5 shots on goal tonight on Broadway. One of his old barns, of course, looking at about minus 120. Last I looked on that shot prop. As mentioned, the Rangers are a former team, and Miller has 19 shots on goal in the past 6 games. And if you're not sold enough, he has 9 points in 9 career games against the New York Rangers. I think players tend to play even stronger and better against teams who traded them away. So that's where I would look. It's a light schedule, though. There's just 2 games. So I'm not crazy about the slate in terms of teams and totals. So I'm going to look at a couple of shot props and keep it at that. Maybe even the Robertson shot prop. Dallas and Minnesota should be an interesting game as well. But JT Miller over 2.5 shots on goal. As I segue over to the chat to see what's cooking here momentarily, Tim writes in, morning, Nick. Well, Rosie's not here. And Al's brother. Good to put a face to a name. Yeah, that's Al's brother, folks. Yashu writes in, trade a first for Shen. I hope he's serious on that front. That's tremendous fun. We did talk about Luke Shen yesterday with Bruce Boudreau, and I do think it is undervalued, the importance of depth pieces, guys who play physical. I think Shen leads the league in hit, has to be top 5 in hits, and that factor in the Stanley Cup playoffs is just so monumental. Very similar to what Ilya Lyubushkin brought last year. I actually like Lyubushkin more than most people did. I know he ended up with the Buffalo Sabres in the offseason, but I thought he brought a lot to the table and was actually a nice coy and stealth ad by Kyle Dubas and company. So I'm very, very curious to see, what they do between now and March 3rd. And of course, that'll be a big topic of conversation on the show as we move closer and closer to March 3rd. But yeah, maybe Luke Shen is a guy they target once again. I think he could be a nice little piece and add. But don't forget, it sounds like Boston and Tampa, 2 teams in the same division, are going after Luke Shen as well. And that's great news for the Vancouver Canucks to spike the price a bit, right? You can't underestimate that mindset for GMs this time of year as well. You pit 2 rivals against each other, best trade target and best trade value, and what a team is offering gets the player. So I think that's the fascination for me too, is how reactionary the Leafs have to be with respect to Boston and Tampa. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to the listener queue as well. Al's brother's an absolute stud for dropping by. I know he's got a show to prepare for, gave his Super Bowl pick. I'm not going to put that out on social media, by the way, because I know they're going to do Overdrive later this week, and he's going to uncover and say what his pick is. But he did tell us where he's leaning. So valuable information if you're looking to bet right now. Again, we get closer and closer to Friday and the return of the Maple Leafs. They're visiting the Columbus Blue Jackets for the front end of a home-and-home back-to-back. Very rare do you see that in this day and age, especially on a Friday and Saturday. But they are playing the Columbus Blue Jackets, who, by the way, folks, are currently last place in the NHL. So very curious to see how the Leafs stack up against them, because we all know for some reason they just can't they rise up to their opponents. They can't rise up to the ones below them. They just seem to play to their level, and that's the unfortunate thing. And that's the unfortunate thing about an 82-game slate. You're not always going to have it in the grand scheme of things. We all know it's going to be Toronto and Tampa, just more so about home ice advantage in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So many thanks to producer Alex Al's brother as well for dropping by, Rosie, for another great installment of 3 Hits with Rosie. I'm Nick Alberga, and we'll talk tomorrow. Take care.